Good afternoon. I'm Tim O'Malley, CEO of Ateema Media Marketing. We're the producers of the Hospitality and Tourism Summit. Welcome. Today's minefield-loaded marketplace calls for a steady hand when it comes to messaging and marketing for your company or event. We've called upon 4 owners of 4 PR companies to help you navigate that minefield in our discussion entitled Communications During Crisis, Practical PR Solutions for Businesses and Events based upon real-life cases. So our goal here is to provide you with some tactics, some ideas, and some inspiration for your own marketing. So let's jump in and introduce our expert panelists. We'll start with Carol Fox. Carol's a veteran in the Chicago arts and entertainment scene. She established Carol Fox & Associates in 1994. The company is celebrating its 25th anniversary, and it has become one of Chicago's largest marketing and public relations firms, focusing on specifically on promoting arts, entertainment, and lifestyle clientele. Carol graduated from Indiana University and earned widespread recognition for PR and marketing work for some of Chicago's leading arts organizations, including Performing Arts Chicago and Hubbard Street Dance Chicago. When she isn't leading her team to achieve stellar results for their impressive roster of clients, Carol brings her passion for the arts to several nonprofit organizations, including Publicity Club of Chicago, Arts Reach, and Dance USA. Additionally, Carol co-founded See Chicago Dance, a nonprofit organization that has become a vital marketing tool for dance in Chicago. She is also dedicated to wiping out diabetes and serves as a board member for JDRF. Ladies and gentlemen, Carol Fox. Welcome, Carol. Noreen Heron is the CEO and founder of Heron Agency, one of the country's top lifestyle communications firms, celebrating 20 years of business in 2020. Her firm represents primarily hotels, restaurants, entertainment, and retail clients, both locally and nationally, including Marriott Hotels of the Midwest, Offshore, which is the world's largest rooftop deck. I believe it's in the Guinness Book of World Records, so that's pretty cool. Jets Pizza, Lucky Strike, Hornblower Cruises, Ocean Prime, Rue, Marriott Theater, Paper Source, as well as events including the One of a Kind Show, the Boat and RV Show, Race to Mackinac, Randolph Street Market, and the Thanksgiving Day Parade. So I think we'll get some help on some marketing for events from our friends here too. Thank you. She has taught crisis communications classes for many companies, including Hyatt, where she served for 5 years as PR director at the Hyatt Regency Chicago before starting her company. Ladies and gentlemen, Noreen Heron. Welcome. Janet Isabelli has served as a marketing consultant to dozens of globally recognized brands for nearly 25 years, including Soho House and Company, Time Out Market, the Illinois Restaurant Association, the Illinois Hotel and Lodging Association, Choose Chicago, Intercontinental Hotels, multiple chefs, and the James Beard Foundation. She has also become highly sought after for her nuanced consultation in crisis communication, which is great because that's what we're here to talk about today. Prior to founding Isabelli Partners in 2011, Janet held the position of Vice President at Wagstaff. Previously, she acted as the Assistant Director of College Programming at the University of Chicago, where she executed large-scale events, a role preceded by her time working with branding expert Adrian Weiss. Janet lends support to several charitable causes, including the Nationwide Hospitality Alliance Facebook group, which she created as an industry-wide resource page in response to COVID-19. Very timely and thoughtful, by the way. She was named one of Crain's Chicago Business 40 Under 40 Emerging Business Professionals in 2007 and one of New City Magazine's 50 Top Food and Beverage Professionals. Please welcome Janet Isabelli. Thanks for being here. Dakota Shultz co-founded Agency 360 with his partner Billy Bracken. The agency turns 13 years old this year, so they are now legally allowed to use social media, which is good when you're a communications agency. They provide custom communication solutions for their partners such as PR, event production, video development, advertising, and basically anything that helps tell people what, how, why, where, and when to do stuff. They developed 2 citywide public art campaigns featuring giant fire hydrants and life-size police horses. They once had skydivers land at WGN on live TV in a circle of pink bras to promote breast cancer awareness. Very creative stuff here. They created an entirely fake news network about bacon before fake news got a bad reputation. I like that line. Fun fact, Dakota is a published poet. Ladies and gentlemen, Dakota Shultz. Thank you for joining us, Dakota. So, so we asked our show attendees to submit their real-life business communications issues and chose 4 that we thought would serve the biggest audience. So I'll start each one by giving you the client type and then a quick summary of the issue. Then we'll open it up to, we'll open up the conversation to our experts here so we can come up with some solutions for our audience. How's that sound? Okay, well, we'll start with situation number 1. The client type is a restaurant. And this came from a restaurant in Chicago. So here's the issue. I'm going to read his words. So how do you balance making people feel safe without intimidating them? It seems as if the more that we push the safety aspect, the more we scare potential customers away. How do we convey safety without making the customer feel ostracized or somehow uncomfortable? Personally, when I go out for not only the food and the ambiance, but also the experience. And when the server is all messed up, the experience is less than it should be. How do you balance what we need to do as far as the right thing for safety with how you communicate the overall experience of your restaurant to get people to come and join you? I'll open that up. Who would like to start the conversation?
I'll start, Tim. I think obviously we're living in very unique times. And the skill set that is needed by our servers, our wait staffs is just on another level. Clearly, empathy and patience and understanding, it's something that comes very naturally to some people, has to be taught to others. And I just recently dined out last week, and I watched a tremendous waitress who went around trying to make everyone comfortable. And she went to one specific party and asked them if she could take a picture of them. And they were so afraid to even turn over their phone. And you could see right away it was, the comfort level was not there. And I think what I would say to restaurateurs first and foremost is you have to work with your employees. The communication has to start with your employees and making them feel comfortable and making sure that they know that you have their back and doing everything possible to support them. And it starts there. And I think in any company, when employees feel supported, they are then more able to go out and provide that to the customer base. But I think there has to be almost role playing that goes on in some cases. And it's very hard now because the time involved with that, it's very challenging. But I think some of the circumstances that I have heard from some of our restaurants, there's just situations that we've never experienced. And then you have staff who, I know some of our restaurants last week, the bridges went up and they were there for a whole night to work, and the next thing they're all told to go home. So they're dealing with their own emotional stress. And then you have people coming out that obviously have some anxiety about dining out, and it's a dance of patience on both sides. But I would say it starts with the management to try to make the employees comfortable, and it goes from there.
That's a really good point. It's hard for people to facilitate that feeling for others if they don't feel it themselves. What other thoughts?
Well, I think that is a great point, Noreen. I think it has to really start internally, with the team first, and then filter outward. And then I think once you've achieved, and I don't know if it's possible to fully achieve a comfort level in the times that we're in now, but the reality is that this is the new normal that we're all living in, right? And how do we then translate all of the good work and the training that you've done with your team members into making your guests feel comfortable? And I think that's where the communication element comes in, and really ensuring your customer base that this is a safe place. This is a hygienic place. The good news is that restaurants are among the most highly regulated industries in the world when it comes to health and safety. And
right.
so
They've
then
been doing this for years. They've been doing it forever. Yeah.
They have. And now obviously the demands are much greater, but if any industry is equipped to do it, it's our restaurant industry, without a doubt. So then it's taking the steps that you've established with your team and the internal measures and protocols that you've put into place, whether that's, elegant signage that notes a 6-foot separation point for safe social distancing, whether that is masks that your team are wearing, masks that you've made available for your customers, hand sanitizers throughout the place. But I think there comes that point where you have to really communicate to your customer what it is you're doing. And when we think about that communication piece, it's taking it through all of your branded channels, whether that's your website, whether that's your email database, your social media. I think there's an opportunity too to create vignettes, short videos of your team in action and a busy night of service where people are interacting and having fun, despite the fact that we have to wear these face coverings, and really showing people that it's okay, that you can have a great time when you come out to eat here, and using all of the communication channels at your disposal to really share that with your audience and prepare them for the experience that lies ahead, not just what the rules are that they have to follow,
right,
but the great time that can be had as a result.
Great. So let me interrupt there for a second. I want to make sure that this person, his question was about the balance between communicating safety and an enjoyable experience. So we only got a couple minutes left on this topic, so let's focus on the enjoyable experience part of the equation. Any thoughts on that, Carol or Dakota?
I think that actually a lot of what both Noreen and Janet said kind of plays into that, really, in terms of understanding who your customer is, trusting in your employees, and that they know how to engage with customers. And like this new normal, to get there, normalization is a process, right? So everybody's at kind of a different stage in that process, if you want to think about it in that way right now. And I know we had some clients that, were quick to put up all the signs that they were supposed to, right, about social distancing and wearing masks and washing hands and all that kind of stuff. And here we are 4 months later, and I remember walking through the venue going, there's nothing but signs all over the place. I feel like I'm just being screamed at, and we've taken away the voice of the employee to really engage with the customer to make him or her feel welcome. And I think that requires a lot of active attention to go back to that consistently, to find that balance. I mean, one of the things that we talk a lot about, within our team and to our customers too, is, to be heard requires being a better listener, right? And so if you can do that with your customers, if you can do that with your staff, you're gonna, have the message that you want to be shared, reach them more, effectively, I think.
Yeah, very good point. Carol, would you like to add anything? You're muted, I believe.
Hello. Janet.
It was going to happen to one of us at some point.
I know, right?
Like it was who the bet was on. Yeah.
Wait, did you just say better you than me?
Janet mentioned video, which I think is really important. We've gone into a couple of restaurants that we work with and shot very fun video showing safety protocols, showing a sense of humor, showing a very fun experience. And not only were those picked up by television stations, but we've run them on all the social media platforms and all the things that you've mentioned. So I think it's a really great tool to show what you want to show, not just say it or not just use the signage, but show the experience.
Yeah, that's great. Any final? Go ahead.
Sorry, Tim. Well, I think Carol makes an excellent bridge to how this plays potentially into the media relations and the PR aspect of what it is that we do day to day. That content that Carol's team shot at their restaurant clients became a usable set of content for TV stations. This is going to be something that we will probably hit on a couple of times during this webinar today, but it is really, really thoughtful to think about when you're filming your team or taking photographs of your team or your line or your dining room full of people, that these are assets that can potentially be usable for your media relations campaign and communicating to the press what it is that you're doing to keep your customers safe, having a great time while following the rules, and then potentially earning some coverage out of it.
Yeah, that's really, really good stuff here. Any other final thoughts on this?
I agree with what Carol and Janet just said. I think maybe some of you saw that the Department of Health and Human Services announced that they're spending $250 million on a Defeat Despair and Inspire Hope campaign. It was announced yesterday. And so they are hiring national PR agencies. I'd sure like to be one, but to get that messaging out. And so I think if we look at it like anyone who's viewing this, it is all of our jobs in the hospitality community to make people feel comfortable to come back and put a visual on that.
So if we're going to dumb this down, simplify this for our audience, and we'll just go real quick around the horn here. We'll start with Janet. The question is, what percentage, if you're simplifying your communications, what percentage would you communicate safety versus great experience? Percentage. If you could start us, Janet.
Well, I would say that you want to go 50-50 on this one, because I think, and not to cop out and say 50-50.
Too late.
It's a
late,
total cop out. Total
Sorry,
cop
guys.
out.
Sorry. Dakota, I look forward to your response to this one. I do think that there has
I'll go
to
last.
I think there has to be an equal balance, right? And I think that was the premise of the question. How do you balance, right?
Yeah.
Balance the safety and balance the good time. And I think it's about half and half.
Outstanding. Dakota?
In that, my kids just started back to school with e-learning, and one of the things that I think about a lot is like how teachers so miraculously create like these individual learning plans. I'd look at it more that way, that you're going to have in your restaurant people that have probably been dining out since March regularly and feel very comfortable about it, you know, and that it's not that they're not worried about safety.
Outward communications though?
Outward gets a little tougher because you can't, you know, you're not seeing who you're talking to. You're talking to everybody at once, right? It's different than at a table kind of thing. I mean, what everybody just talked about in terms of, you know, creating those videos and pushing that out, whether it's anecdotes, you know, that kind of stuff. I think in all of that, you find the balance, right? And if you want to get really analytical, there's metrics that you're going to use to track which videos got the most engagement, and you'll see who's paying attention. You know, one of the things that we did, and this is you asked for quick answers, right?
Yeah, numbers.
Take surveys. No, take surveys. Like we found that we were guessing a lot at what we thought people would want. And finally we just decided, let's just ask them, right? And do that in the right way. And it gave us great data in terms of what was the most important message.
Okay, so if you're telling someone on the street, restaurateur, what percentage safety versus great experience in terms of communications, what would it be? What's your number? Does it sounds like you're 50-50.
No, I'm going to go 70-30. 70 experience, 30 safety.
Great. Noreen, thank you. Dakota.
I think percentages, Tim, are so challenging on that front because
Absolutely.
it reminds me of, you know, when I used to give my children medicine and I'd say, boy, this tastes so delicious. And, you know, it's all in the package, right? I tend to be a little bit more experiential, but I think if I had to give a percentage, I'd say 60-40, 60 experience, 40 safety. But I think it's all in the presentation. For me, I come from a long line of Irish women that when you walk into their home, they are making you feel as comfortable as can be. They're getting you a drink. They're making sure you've got not one place but two. And I think that's where we're at with our restaurants. That's what our social media platforms have to reflect. We are here to care for you. There will be no anxiety when you come. And however we present that, I think that's where the percentage gets a little murky for me. But, and I don't know, I don't think people want to feel like they're taking medicine. They still want it to feel like it is a destination, like it's a night away from anxiety. So your question's a challenging one, but I'll say 60-40.
I love it. Carol?
I'll go with 60-40 too. It's kind of like right there in the middle, but it is all about the experience and making people feel comfortable. So I think it's in that order.
All right, well, thanks, guys. I thought you came up with some good ideas in terms of helping our restaurateur friends out there, how to communicate and properly during these difficult times and keep a balance between communicating safety versus still the great experience that you can have by coming out enjoying some of Chicago's great restaurants. So thank you. Let's move on to the next topic, which is submitted by a theater. And I'm going to just read what the theater manager submitted. So he says, as a theater manager, I am faced with the difficult issue of how to communicate with our audience when we don't have any shows for the foreseeable future. We don't know how to market what we have planned in the spring because of all the uncertainty. I've heard this one a million times. I hate to remain silent and lose the connection with the audience, but I'm unsure what the best tactics are to keep them informed and engaged. Who would like to start us off?
I nominate Carol.
I was about to say the same exact thing.
What? I was going to say that we're working with a number of theaters, and what they're doing now is they're working very hard to create virtual content. So, and it's all over the board. I think with one client, it's a one-man show. He started with Facebook Live to show that, you know, what he does to stay out there and have recognition and keep building his following, and that went so well. Then he changed his model to actually paid versions, remote performances. And so people are paying per household to experience his remote performance. It's limited to X number of people on the screen, and you can see them all, and they're all participating, and it involves customer interaction. So that has worked out really well. Others have done things.
So if I could interrupt Carol for 1 second, since I'm with all PR people, I can do this. I'm going to take a second to make a cheap plug, which is, I think who you're talking about is Dennis Watkins, right?
Yeah, Dennis Watkins.
It is Dennis Watkins. So he is going to be the MC. He's a tremendous magician. He's going to be the MC for our networking sessions tonight, in fact. So that's going to be fun. So he's just a great talent. So I felt I needed to do that. So sorry, guys. Go ahead.
Totally okay. No, Dennis is amazing, and people have experienced his shows online, which have been super successful, and they've loved it. And in fact, we work with someone else who has a performing arts center, and they're actually going to be promoting his performances to their clientele and doing exclusive performances just for their patrons. So it's worked out quite well, but we've done some other things too. There's a company out of Boston that had an amazing one-person show online. It was awesome, and so we've worked with them to get national coverage on this performance. It got rave reviews, and that, you know, has increased the reputation of that theater company. And there are conversations with actors and writers. There are and directors. There are we have a museum that's doing a conversation. They're having the Frida Kahlo exhibit, which was postponed for a year. So they're doing things like they're having an author who wrote a book on Frida Kahlo doing a book club experience online for their patrons to build up the excitement about Frida Kahlo. So I think there's many, many ways of creating virtual content, and I think that's the key during this time.
That's great. Very helpful insight. Other thoughts?
One thing that I really like about what Carol said is that the theater, the Dennis Watkins performance, started as a Facebook Live that was open to everybody. And I think it was an inherently smart strategy because it gave everybody a little bit of a taste, you know, of what you could experience and what a performance in a virtual format could look like. And then when they saw that it was successful, they were able to then move into a paid platform. I think this is an idea that's highly applicable for sure to the theater world, but to just about any industry. Like if you think about a restaurant, for example, a chef could do something similar. They could offer some very short cooking demonstrations on their Instagram Live or on their Facebook Live, give their fans a taste. And if they see that there's demand and real intent for it, then they could take that into a paid platform. You know, and every business is looking for creative ways to generate revenue during this time. And that sneak peek for free over social media, then moving into the Zoom or whatever the platform is that you're using virtually is a really smart way to make that happen.
Yeah, that's great perspective. Other thoughts?
We're also representing theaters as we have been for many years. And we also, Carol, we're representing Hershey Felder, who's doing a live concert from Florence, Italy, coming up in September. But the one thing I would say is, that I would encourage, again, not only theaters, but any business to do, is to be authentic and to speak to where they are at the moment. I was in a meeting the other day with a client who said, the way our climate is right now, I feel like I'm on the Titanic. I haven't sunk, but I see it. And should I reach out to my customer base? Should I tell them that I need their support? And we said, of course you should. I mean, right now, this is the time to say to your customer base, here's where we're at. If I were a theater manager, I would be blogging regularly. I would be taking pictures of the venue. I'd be taking artistic pictures of the dark theater. And because you can't, when the theater reopens, you can't be that person that, we all have someone in our life who once a year, they come to us looking for money for a fundraiser or something. And you know that like clockwork, you're just gonna hear from them once a year. I think to keep that communication line open and an authentic communication line, because authenticity is everything. And I think it's okay right now for businesses to say, we're hurting. And it can be that maybe for some of our restaurants, maybe they're only hurting Monday through Wednesday. Maybe some are fortunate enough to be busy on the weekends, but they still can tell their authentic story to their customer base of how they need help. And I think that line of communication, I think it's appreciated, because I think if you are a stakeholder, and let's say I'm a subscriber of that theater, or I've even been to the theater a couple times, I want to know how they're doing and I want to hear from them. And I don't think any business owner should be afraid right now to feel like, oh, maybe I shouldn't email them, maybe they'll unsubscribe, maybe they will, but I think you'll get a lot more positive goodwill from it, keeping a dialogue open.
Yeah, I think that's really important.
You know, this is an example to me of where communications and operations kind of touch a little bit more closely. Like with theater in particular, there's so much more development time for that content generation, or I guess there could be, right? Like if you have the ability to do the one-man show, to do virtual events, you know, that might shorten that window a little bit. But if you're trying to coordinate an ensemble in some way, right? There's practice and rehearsal, there's tech stuff, there's all that kind of stuff that I can understand where the person that submitted this has some real consternation of how do you work towards a future date that you're totally uncertain of, and then how do you communicate around that? We work with a number of kind of sports entities that have that same thing. Like they don't know if they're going to have games, and yet the players are arriving, you know, coaches are there, they're going through all this effort, but how do you then engage the fan base to say, we think we're going to play, but we're not certain? And, you know, there's the frequency of that communication that is going to probably provide more opportunity around all that, you know, is important.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
I wanted to add too that Janet and I were able to work together on a virtual event that I think crosses the lines of different genres. And so we had Janet's client, Virtue Restaurant with Eric Williams, the chef, and an artist that works with Expo Chicago, the art fair at Navy Pier. And we had a dinner, a special VIP collector dinner with a conversation with Eric and the artist, and an amazing dinner that he prepared. And Janet, you can add to that as well, because we both got terrific coverage out of that and really enhanced the visibility nationally for both.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was so much fun working with you, Carol, and your team on that, and with the whole Expo team. And I know Eric really got a lot out of it, but it's just a great example of the cross-collaborative opportunities across genres, as Carol mentioned, that allow these businesses to resonate with their audience base. You know, in Eric Williams' case, you know, he's extremely passionate about art and has an unbelievable personal collection as well as a great collection hanging in his own restaurant. And so this natural tie to Amanda Williams, an artist whom he collects also, felt good. It felt right. It felt really authentic and genuine. And for him to create a dinner that was inspired by her artwork, and then to engage the Expo consumer, some of whom may or may not have been terribly familiar with Eric and his restaurant and his work, was really a great win. And as Carol mentioned, the press was incredibly responsive to it, and resulted in some very, very positive stories in an otherwise rocky time.
Yes, well said, well said. Well, so if I'm summarizing this conversation, I think what you're saying is they've got to come up with some creative content to keep the word out there, either by producing something or partnering with someone, simple social media. There's a lot of ways to do it, but find unique content that aligns with their brand that will keep them out in the public. Is that a fair summary? Our third situation here, really, it's not about what type of client that could use this information. It applies to lots of types of businesses and events. Bottom line, it's how do you promote a grand opening now? So how do you create excitement for a new destination or experience when there's a kind of subdued mood over pretty much everything right now, and so much of everything is done virtually? So really, I was joking earlier, but how do you put the grand in grand opening during these crazy times?
I'll start. We just opened the Hyatt Cook County Hospital, now Hyatt. Next door to it is Dr. Murphy's Food Hall, which is comprised of 12 restaurants. And the timing was that they were opening now. So we, of course, had to celebrate. And what we did was a virtual press conference for the hotel. We had writers from the New York Times and the Guardian and international newspapers represented, broadcast outlets, and you have to improvise. It was a lot more work. We did a video package of the hotel so that people could experience it. It went very well. We got a lot of coverage. But next door, when we opened the food hall, I think the amount of work that you have to do on the backside, on the communication side, is so huge. We did 4 press seatings because we were trying to keep to space limitations. So we did 4 seatings with time allowed for cleaning in between. So we had 4 hours just for cleaning.
Wow.
I think the amount of detail that needs to go into creating excitement, I think people still want to celebrate. We all do, and everybody wants things to be happy, and we want to have the release from the anxiety that we're all feeling day to day. So,
amen, sister.
And I think anytime you're representing something new, you're showing someone's baby, you're presenting it to the world, and that has to be done with a sense of pride and excitement. And I think what's interesting now is just all of the details that you have to all of the procedural things that you have to do that we didn't.
Yeah, good point.
I'll add on. So we just opened a new hotel in Nashville, Tennessee, last week, in fact, and similar circumstances. This has been the slated opening time frame for the past year, and ownership really wanted to stick to it. And there's a real sense of optimism, I think, that comes with a new opening. It sends a message that things can still open despite the circumstances that we're in. It sends a message that there's a future for hospitality businesses. There's a future for travel again. There is a present time and a future for dining again too. And very similar to what Noreen said, is that we did a lot over video. First and foremost, we conducted a ribbon cutting ceremony of the property, and instead of streaming it and doing it virtually, in Nashville, the space limitations are 25 people or less as far as gatherings are concerned. So we kept the celebration very intimate to just executive team members and ownership only, but we captured the whole thing on video. We made it into a celebratory moment. There was a champagne toast and a beautiful toast from the executive chef, who actually happens to be Tony Montuano, a Chicagoan we all know and love.
Yeah, he's a great one.
Yeah, and we sent that B-roll package of the ribbon cutting along with B-roll footage of the entire hotel far and wide to herald the moment. And then as far as press was concerned, we were able to, the week prior to opening, stagger a number of individual socially distant, safe one-on-one preview tours with ownership of the property. And this honestly actually worked this is something we may have done anyway, with or without a pandemic, but I think during this time it was especially important to communicate that we are taking great precaution. There is no one trailing us on this tour. This is really just customized for you. And we allotted, a lot of time in between the individual press tours, so there was no crossing of paths. And it worked out really, really well, to the point where people felt special. They felt a sense of excitement and enthusiasm for something new coming to their city. And then the last thing that I'll mention too is because of the time that we're in, it's also really forced us to get creative with how we can appeal to locals, right? In a hotel scenario, when travel is quite limited at this time, who is our audience base? Well, today and tomorrow, and maybe for the next 30 days or 90 days, it really is people in our own backyard. So what are things that we can be doing to really hyper localize our offerings and make the people living, in this case, the people living in Nashville, feel as though this is their home away from home. This is a haven for them, and they're the first to try the restaurant. They're the first to try the spa. They're the first to get to stay overnight. And this really becomes their place before it becomes anyone else's. And I think there's something very special and positive to that slant that you can put out into the world that makes the opening, while maybe not as grand as it would seem with a 500-person VIP party, grand in a very different and very personal way to the people who are actually going to consume the product.
Well said.
Thank you.
Carol,
yeah, I'm taking notes on what you guys are saying for the stuff that we have coming up. I mean, I've been wrestling so much with like some of our previous conversations of how do you recognize the constraints that you have and use that as a way to bolster creativity versus not getting caught up in that everything is so different now. We need to totally recreate everything. And it's just like, no, there's still an audience. There's still news around these openings. So, you know, build it and they'll come. And I mean, it seems like you guys have kind of found a sweet spot with that for at least the examples that you gave. So kudos.
You don't want me to pull out the percentage question again, do you?
Dakota has to go first.
No, there's my redo on that.
Carol, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. I was going to say, and I lost my train of thought, but in terms of percentages, I know that the travel industry, they're saying it's still 20% occupancy in Chicago, and it may have even gone up by then. So I do think there are people participating in openings and other events, but we do have that Friends pop-up experience opening in Chicago on October 1st, running for 3 months on Michigan Avenue. And the city's involved, and they're really excited and motivated by something happening. People are looking for things. And so, as Dakota said, not only are things getting press coverage, there are opportunities, but all around the Midwest, we're getting coverage from St. Louis to Detroit, et cetera, because they're looking to do drive trips. And I think, Tim, as we have talked about in terms of the travel industry, the drive market is probably the first to come back versus people getting on a plane. And so we're really focusing on drive markets, and they're interested and they're covering this opening, and they're all looking for something to talk about that's positive.
Well, I can tell you, you mentioned the 20%. So I'd heard last 2 weeks ago it was 24% occupancy for the week, but it seems to have been growing by like a point a week. But we are getting stories from hoteliers of 70 and 80% occupancy on weekends, filled mostly with the drive market, just as you just highlighted. So I think your strategy is right aligned with what the market is for sure, and can't wait to see that Friends pop up. My question relating to all of what you just said, do you find that some of the media is starving for some of this stuff because it's just been so blah?
I'd say absolutely. Everything that we have done, and I think everyone else is going to say the same thing based on what you've already said, but everything's gotten great coverage. People are clamoring for something to talk about other than, you know, the heaviness of what we're going through right now. And I think it's optimistic, uplifting, and the coverage is there.
Yeah, that's great.
I would agree, you know, and I think, you know, on one hand, I think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity for coverage, and we're finding maybe for the first time in a while that it's not all adjacent to the pandemic, you know, not all of it. It's great. We have a new hotel opening. It's the questions aren't necessarily, what are you doing to keep customers safe? What are you doing for hygiene? We're getting some of those too, for sure, you know, without question. I think reporters still have to do their job and ask those questions. But we're also seeing a fair amount of coverage that's very feature oriented. That's very much, you know, not ignoring the fact that there's a pandemic. Like, we can't all be tone deaf to the situation, and the media certainly cannot either. But we are seeing the waves open up a little bit where it's like, a breath of fresh air that we can cover something just strictly from a feature perspective, with the implied notion that, of course, this is a luxury hotel. It's doing everything it's supposed to be doing to keep its customers safe. But then on the flip side of that, I do see, on the other hand, another side to the media, which right now is just a lot of pressure. You know, it's a lot of pressure in newsrooms. It's a lot of pressure from people who are still on staff, who are maybe covering additional jobs of former colleagues that have maybe been furloughed or have taken buyouts or have been laid off, sadly, during this time. And I do think that that creates a little bit more of a pressure point for sometimes reaching the exact right contact, because there's been so much change in the landscape over the course of the last 6 months. And then also really just knowing that what may have been a 2-week lead time 6 months ago could really be a 4-week lead time now, just because there's so many fewer reporters in the landscape who are able to actually cover it, and this sort of compressed need of one person to do the job of 3. So that is just a nuance that I've noticed in pitching over the course of the last 2 months, especially.
That's fair.
And yeah, I don't know if anybody else has noticed that too, but it's something that's been top of mind.
Any final thoughts as we wrap up this segment? Okay. Well, thank you. I think it was some great ideas in terms of putting the grand into the back end of the grand opening. Hopefully they were helpful to everyone in the audience. We're going to shift over to our 4th and final topic. Again, this is a topic that speaks to many different types of businesses and events. So, and that is what we summarize it as: the politics of the mask. So how do you communicate with employees and customers regarding aggressive anti-mask interactions? Such confrontations can blow up quickly in the news media or on social platforms. How can you be ready to handle your own crisis communications if you don't have time to hire an expert? And how do you draw clear lines between health and safety and political opinion for your business operations? So this one, I think in my introduction, I used the word minefield. Well, that's why you're here, the expert. So we'll let you guys cover it here. I'll back away. Who wants to start?
I nominate Dakota.
Oh, thank you. Why did I feel like that was coming? Yeah, I mean, it is a minefield, like, unfortunately. And there's just, I think that's part technological. It's so easy for hyper local, you know, almost familial issues to go viral and become national news. And we've all seen the small business owner or the person that finds themselves in a spotlight, you know, unsurprisingly. And, you know, that can be from things that are happening within their business. It could be from, you know, bad choices that they made to speak out on an issue without thinking what that meant from a business standpoint. Even if it's their personal opinion, it can, you know, I think we talked earlier about, you know, social media and employees and how, you know, you balance their ability to be a part of your company culture, right? But react to the broader culture that they're in, and how you as a business owner can foster that. And it's super complicated. There's going to be no easy answers, you know, on this topic, other than, I think, some of the things we had said earlier about, you know, be thoughtful, be compassionate, be empathetic, be, you know, as authentic as you can, right? But
so you're saying don't throw them out. Don't just physically throw them out of the space. That's not going to work.
No, it might. I'm not saying that. It absolutely might, you know, and I think
might
that
get everyone in a
depends,
little trouble.
Yeah, no, completely. And, you know, not just call it the health safety precautions, but, you know, frankly, we got to deal with like physical safety considerations, unfortunately. And if there's a way to, you know, remove that person, and if that's necessary, certainly you're doing that in the right way. But there's going to be no easy answers, and, you know, but I think it's certainly something that it would be negligent on the part of business owners if they haven't thought through that possibility, in my opinion.
For sure. And then how does it relate to training as well, in terms of employees? Other thoughts?
You know, I am actually dealing with that myself right now. We are taking our main office on Belmont, which only has a couple people working on site, everyone else is remote, and we're opening it up for an artist exhibition for the month of September. And so we've been going through protocols and communications and signage. So I completely relate to what we're talking about because I'm doing it myself, and really thinking about the mask situation. And so we have, I went out and bought a lot of extra masks for people, and it's like everything else, it's timed admission. So it's a limited number of people who can enter at any one time. But
Sure.
I have masks on hand, and I think the key to me is not what you say, it's how you say it. And I think knowing
So true.
who is responsible for communicating with guests is key, and making sure that person relates to people well, can do it in a really positive manner, but a forceful manner, but it's how it's going to be perceived. And I think selecting who that person is to handle that communication is most important.
Oh, you're right. Some people are better suited for it than others. There's no question, especially when you get into one of those complicated situations. So,
I would agree entirely with what Carol just said. And also, I think it's about setting the stage too. This kind of goes back to our very first topic. So in a way, we're kind of closing the circle, but it goes back to communicating with your guests in advance of their visit as to what it is they can expect and what the mask policies are. And I think last week, and honestly, some of the policies changed so quickly. And from one day and one press conference to the next, it's like, wait, do we have to wear masks when we're seated at the table? Or wait, no, now we have to wear them until when a server approaches that, like I think there can be a lot of confusion, and there's a lot of updates to keep up with all the time. So I definitely encourage all businesses to do the very best that they can to stay in touch with the most up-to-date rulings. And then once they know what their policy is at their own restaurant, to just actively communicate it. Last week with the mask policy change in restaurants, I saw a number of really fantastic social media posts come up from restaurateurs all over the city, basically reminding their customers that as of Friday, our guests will be required to wear masks anytime a server approaches the table or anytime a member of our staff approaches a table. And some of them got really creative with it. They did some cute graphics that caught, that were eye-catching when you scrolled through your Instagram feed. More than anything, they were informative, they were clear, they were direct, and they were thankful. Right. They were thankful for the business. They were thankful for people's understanding and cooperation in advance. And they weren't afraid to say, anyone who isn't willing to follow these guidelines as established by the state of Illinois, should probably not come to the restaurant, and they were able to, they said it more eloquently than I just did, but they said it in a way that was gracious, yet firm and hospitable, which is what our city is known for. So that communication and setting the stage and setting the expectation from the get-go is super important, as is identifying the person responsible for communicating that message on site.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, if when they're welcomed into the space, someone is communicating right up in front that it's important that you wear your mask in this place, blah, 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 it's going to set the bar higher. Expectations will be higher, and it'll be easier to manage from that standpoint. So really good insight. Any final thoughts as we wrap up our entire session here today?
I think people have to pay attention to the news within organizations. I think it's every day things are changing. There has to be someone in leadership that is checking to see, as Janet just said, not only what's going on restriction-wise, policy-wise, but also what's happening in our world, because there are so many, I see them, so many tone-deaf social media posts. And I think that is where you got to be so careful now. And everyone's living online. So many more people obviously are at home going through the media feed. It's so important that an organization is really reading and watching the news right now. So I would just add that. And I'd also add to the last conversation, the importance of leadership throughout this right now. I mean, Carol just said, I've got the masks, this is what's happening. Everyone knows Carol wants you to wear a mask there. I think that's important in an entity. Whether a customer comes in and there maybe the customer feels that he or she shouldn't, but it comes from leadership to say, this is what we are doing as a team, this is our policy. And for the employees then to know that leadership has their back, and this is consistency. And consistency always leads to success, just in general, I think. So true,
so true.
I would
Other
add to
thoughts to wrap up, Dakota?
I agree with all of that. And I would, one of the things that I've been challenging myself to do is to seek out the good news as well and make sure I'm proactively sharing that with others, because it just, everything can be so heavy and distracting right now that it's obviously important to know the context in which you're doing business, right, in that environment, but don't lose sight of kind of, the stories that aren't front page, right? Because those good ones can really make a difference, not just in terms of the vibe of your business, but how customers are engaging and all that. And there are good stories out there. Absolutely.
Well, if you have good stories, by the way, positive stories, people will pay more attention now than ever before. I've seen that. You have a little bit of good information or positive news and they're all over you. Because everyone is looking for, any silver lining possible right now. So I think that's a really good point. Carol, any closing thoughts?
No, I just, in general, I think everyone should work really hard to be creative and stay out there. I think there's been a lot of conversation about people wanting to lay low, be behind the scenes, not put themselves out there because they're concerned about how it's going to be received. And I think based on what I've heard today from everybody and my own experience, I think it's the time to get out there and to create contact and be in front of your customers. And I think it's been working quite well. So I would encourage people not to be afraid of it. I think you have to be really careful, but I wouldn't be afraid of it.
Yeah, that's great. Janet, final thoughts?
All great points. I would only just add that I think we are nothing without our teams, right? So really ensuring that there is a great system of internal communication with the people working with you and working for you to make them feel secure in all of the decisions that are being made, having them contribute to the decisions that are being made, tapping into their creative minds. You might have a sleeper social media star on your team who's got terrific ideas for video content. So I think establishing a weekly cadence of communication with your team to do a lot of different things. I think to share what the latest news and updates are and the latest protocols, but also to share positive news, as Dakota mentioned, and also to brainstorm. Tap into the creative minds that are excited about being there day in and day out, and despite the struggle, still show up on time and still. What is it that Tyra Banks would say, that they smile with their eyes and through the mask. And these are the people who are going to keep our businesses going for the long term. So internal communications and internal cadence of meeting and celebrating and brainstorming with your team and information sharing with your team is critical.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone. So let's go around just to thank you, Janet Isabelli. If you raise a hand, Dakota Shultz, Noreen Heron, Carol Fox, you guys are the best. I learn so much every time we do this and totally enjoy hanging out with you guys. So thanks for spending some time with us today. I think our audience should have some great tidbits and tactics to apply to their business. Thanks to you guys. So many thanks. Thanks for everyone for attending today. Enjoy the rest of the summit. Thank you.